Welcome back to this week's intermediate to advanced level episode of the Irish Accent Podcast. I hope you're all having a great week so far. It's nearly the weekend, just 1 or 2 more days left, depending on where you're listening from, so hang in there. So last week's topic was all about the Irish accent, and I know I shared some interview links to different videos that showed or exemplified different regional accents. But this week I really wanted to talk about 2 TV shows where you can actually hear the Irish accent. The 2 TV shows that I'm going to talk about are actually very, very famous, and I think many or most of you will have already heard of these, or maybe even watched them. They both came out in the last 7 or 8 years and gained a lot of recognition worldwide. It was really cool to see Irish shows set in Ireland and with a lot of Irish actors becoming so well known internationally. Ireland does have a great TV production sector and there have been a number of great shows, but not many reached the level of fame internationally that these 2 shows reached. So the 2 TV shows that I'm going to discuss today are Normal People and Derry Girls. So let's start with Normal People. This series is based on the novel by Irish writer Sally Rooney. The book itself was actually a worldwide bestseller, and then the TV adaptation came out during the COVID lockdowns. The book actually came out in 2018 and it was slowly gaining popularity. I had definitely heard of it before the TV show and I'm pretty sure it was recommended to me by many people, but if I remember correctly, I didn't read it until the TV show came out. Sally Rooney, the author, has since become one of Ireland's most famous authors and she has several great books out now, but it was this one, Normal People, that really launched her career. The TV show came out in 2020 and I remember clearly that it came out during the COVID lockdowns because at that time I was living at home, I had very little to do, and I remember it was such a good distraction at that time. It felt like everyone I knew was watching it and we were all really glad to have something to talk about and discuss that wasn't just talking about lockdown. In terms of the plot, the story follows 2 young people, Conall and Marianne. At the beginning, they're both in secondary school in a small town in Ireland. I've mentioned before, but in Ireland we call it secondary school. So I think a lot of other countries would say high school, but we say secondary school. And this is the school that you go to between the ages of about 12 or 13 until you're 17 or 18. So in this book or TV show, while they're in secondary school, Conall is quite popular, he's very sporty, he's very well liked, while Marianne, on the other hand, is very much an outsider. She doesn't have any friends in school, she's actually made fun of by the other students. Conall's mom is a cleaner and she works for Marianne's mom, cleaning their house. And Conall is very intrigued by Marianne and the feeling is mutual and they begin this sort of friendship or a bit of a complicated relationship. And the series then follows them as they move to Dublin for university. And there's this really big shift then where Conall, who sort of thrived when he was back in the small town and was very popular, he feels completely out of place up at university in Dublin, whereas Marianne, who was struggling a lot back in their hometown, she very much so finds her people at university. She meets a lot of like-minded people and the lifestyle suits her a lot. So the series basically follows them growing up over those 4 years at university. It follows their on and off relationship, their relationships with other people until they graduate. I thought that the book Normal People was good. I really enjoyed reading it. And I then thought that the show did such an amazing job of adapting it. I felt like it captured life growing up in Ireland really well. It felt so real or so recognisable. I suppose growing up, I had watched a lot of TV shows and movies that showed a lot of British or American high schools. But this was the first time I'd watched a school experience that felt so recognisable to my own. Even just the inside of the secondary school, all of the accents, the students themselves, it all felt very familiar. There's one scene in particular where they're going to the Debs. So I'm not sure if you'll have heard of that word before, Debs. I think it's a very Irish word, but it comes from debutante ball. And after our final year of secondary school, when most people are about 17 or 18 years old, we have our Debs. So it's basically our final dance. So you do your final set of exams, which is called the Leaving Certificate in June, and then you have your Debs in about July or August. It's very similar to prom, but it was very cool to see the Debs shown in a TV show. It was definitely the first time I had ever seen it. This show is set in Sligo, which is in the west of Ireland, and then of course later it's set in Dublin. So there's such a huge range of Irish accents in this show. The main actress who plays Marianne, her name is Daisy Edgar Jones, and she's actually British, but she did such an incredible Irish accent in this show. I think that's not always the case. I can think of many examples of movies or TV shows where people try to do Irish accents and it's not always the most accurate, but I think she really nailed it. So she was doing kind of a generic West of Ireland accent. It's pretty difficult to place, but yeah, I thought her accent was very accurate. There's actually a Cork accent in the show, which is Connell's mom. I think one of the teachers has a Kerry accent. You've got a lot of South Dublin and North Dublin accents when they go to university with a lot of their friends. There's even a Northern Irish accent, which is Connell's roommate. I think his name might be Niall. And then the main character, Connell, is played by Paul Mescal. So Paul Mescal actually comes from Kildare, which is quite close to Dublin, but he also does a generic West of Ireland accent in the show. So definitely a good show to watch if you want to be exposed to a lot of different Irish accents. But I highly, highly recommend this show in general. And it's such a brilliant insight into small Irish town life, secondary school, university, as I mentioned, Irish accents. If you want to watch it, I think it's available on some streaming platforms like Hulu, BBC iPlayer, or Amazon Prime potentially, depending on where you are. So the second show I want to talk about is Derry Girls. So this show first came out in 2018 and there's 3 seasons in total. I often still see people asking for another season or saying that they're so disappointed that this show was cancelled. So I know this is one show in particular that was really popular and people were devastated when it ended. The show is set in Derry in Northern Ireland during the 1990s, specifically around 1994 and 1995. So it's very much set against the backdrop of the Troubles. So very briefly, the Troubles in Northern Ireland were a 30-year dispute which came from religious conflict between the Catholics and the Protestants, and also a lot of geopolitical conflict between the British and the Irish. And these tensions, well, of course, they date back hundreds of years, but it really came to a head with a huge amount of violent conflict in Northern Ireland between these 30 years specifically. The series follows Erin Quinn, her cousin Orla, their friends Claire, Michelle, and Michelle's English cousin James. And even though the show is set during some of the darkest times in Northern Ireland, it's actually a comedy show. And it's so brilliant how it's done. It's against, obviously, this extremely dark and violent and very serious backdrop. But the whole focus is on this young group of people who are basically only concerned with their own school life and dating. And it's just a very, very funny show. And almost every episode, they end up in some sort of mad situation, which is in most cases unrelated to the political unrest. But obviously, everything is so tied into that at the same time. They go to a Catholic school run by nuns. The main nun, actually, Sister Michael, is a brilliant character in the show. But really, all the actors in this show are brilliant and all the characters are so well written. I particularly liked Michelle. I thought she was a really funny character, but they're all great. And obviously, this is a really good show to get used to the Northern Irish accent. Well, I suppose the Derry accent in particular. There is actually a Southern Irish accent in there. Erin Quinn, the main character Erin's dad, is played by Tommy Tiernan, who is a famous Irish comedian and actor. So you might hear the slightly different accent from him. But I highly recommend these 2 shows if you haven't already seen them. If you have watched them, I would be very curious to hear what you think of them. What is your opinion? And if you haven't seen them and you decide to go watch them, I'd love to hear what you make of it and if you enjoy either of these shows. So that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much as always for listening. Wishing you a great weekend ahead, and I'm looking forward to speaking to you again next week. Bye bye.